How is it going on, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we have the third episode of Refine It with 3 more designs to review, and if you don't already know what the series is, it's basically a design feedback video where I go over the designs that have been submitted by you guys, give some initial feedback, let you know what I like and I don't like on the designs, and then do a quick sort of speed art section during which I make some basic adjustments that I think would help to basically just improve the piece. It's quite surface level stuff, but it should give you an idea of basically how to take your work to the next level, and also what you could kind of try next time when designing, or even go back and possibly redesign the old piece of work that you submitted. Submissions for future Refine It episodes are now open again, so if you want to see your work featured, then make sure to get in touch with me through email or through DMs on either Twitter, Instagram, or just drop a comment as well, and we can figure out a way to sort that out. Obviously, also, if you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like and a comment, and if you want to see more of my content, then make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. But now, let's get into the first design. So the first design of today's episode has been sent in by Finn, and it's this nice clean matchday design for West Ham United. I really like the way he's incorporated the stadium image into the design itself. I like the fact that it's on quite an angle rather than the stadium being very kind of front on and flat looking. And I like the displacement effect used on top of the stadium as well. It's really cool, and I love the way how it fades and blurs towards the edges of the piece, and it kind of keeps this center area of the design in focus, and it really helps to kind of draw your eye to the important bits, which is obviously kind of the stadium image, the player cutouts, and obviously David Moyes as well. I like how he's used the elements in the foreground and in the background, being obviously the West Ham hammers, to kind of create a bit of depth in the piece, obviously with the foreground element being quite blurred, and then as you go into the background, these become even more blurred to kind of create a realistic looking kind of field blur effect. Again, you know, just to create a bit of depth in the piece. The actual composition itself, I think, could use a little bit of work. I do think Moyes should kind of be more central in line with Zuma, and I would kind of shift him upwards a little bit just to kind of show off more of him, rather than being quite heavy on this side on the left and then it being very empty on the right. Obviously, I kind of get why he's placed the logos there, but again, I think they're a little bit kind of randomly just plonked on there. And one thing that would also fix is the cutout of Ogbonna here on the left, with him kind of facing weirdly like down on behind on Zuma, rather than kind of facing out into the piece like Jared Bowen is doing here, like Zuma's doing here. So I would prefer an image of Ogbonna kind of facing to the left to be used. But overall, it's a nice clean piece, you know, nice solid composition with a couple of tweaks that I think would make it even better. And I think some of the distortion as well, it could have been toned down just a little bit, especially on the players' faces and Moyes' face, as it kind of just, I don't know, it doesn't really sit right with me. On here it works quite well, but then when you get to the actual faces themselves, I think it could have just been kind of masked off, or maybe potentially played around so it kind of missed the faces themselves. But yeah, nice piece, and yeah, let's get into the speed art. So with the speed art section now being done, and obviously you've seen it kind of step by step what's happened, it has been a little bit of a drastic change. Obviously, just for reference, here we've got the before shot, and then here we've got the after shot of the image. So obviously the main change is the gradient map that I've applied to the image, as I do think some of the imagery was a little bit washed out. Not had a lot of contrast on it and not a lot of color as well, and I found it quite difficult to edit as a lot of these cutouts were actually rasterized altogether. So Moise was on a separate layer, but it was kind of deleted in a way. It had like a weird, not a layer mask, but just basically just a brush out of him. So I've kind of had to try and get a little bit more of the contrast back by just layering him up a couple of times and just kind of trying to boost it as much as possible. And then these three player cutouts are all merged into one layer. So like I mentioned before, ideally you'd like Ogbonna to kind of be facing left, but I've just kept it as it is for the purpose of the speed art, as obviously it was quite a quick section of the video. But another thing that I did, I dropped the displacement map, which if I had the exact map, I would probably add it back into the design, but I've just kept it towards the bottom of it with the stadium image, and I wouldn't have obviously gone as far as the players' faces themselves, but it is a cool effect, so I would definitely recommend using that in the future. And then I've basically just added a bit more of a shadow towards the bottom of the image with the gradient map kind of doing a lot of the work, making it a bit more gloomy and dark towards the bottom of it. And then another thing I did, I created obviously the West Ham Hammers pattern, which just kind of looped around a little bit more, and it kind of dragged your eyes towards the middle of the image, so it kind of had like a circular effect essentially. And then I've added like a blown up version of one of the hammers in the foreground as well, similar to what Finn did initially, but just on a bit of a bigger scale again, just to kind of really have that foreground blurred right in your face effect. But yeah, it's not a massive difference, it's just subtle tweaks that you can do. And then I've moved the badge slightly as well, so they kind of sit in between these hammers, and it's framed quite nicely rather than it just being kind of floating above Jared Bowen's head. But yeah, you know, solid design initially, a few little tweaks that will help you to kind of improve your compositions in the future, and just make sure, Finn, to keep your cutouts on separate layers rather than rasterizing them all in one, and make sure to be using smart objects, as that's just kind of like rule number one in the design Bible. Make sure basically nearly everything is a smart object, as it just really allows you to go back and edit things if you're not happy with them, and it's just a lot more flexibility for you if you want to make any tweaks moving forward. But yeah, really thank you for the submission, Finn, and let's move on to design number 2. Design number 2 has been sent in by Bennie, and it's a design featuring Edison from Man City, which is quite fitting considering I'm going to be joining Man City as a designer at the end of this month, so make sure to keep an eye out on that. But yeah, that's enough about me. Let's move on to the actual piece itself. I really like the composition and kind of the idea behind this, with just a nice clean cutout with a really nice treatment on it, being kind of point and center of the design itself. I can see that there's a little bit of a misalignment of a gradient map or a color lookup, I think, on the collar, but I don't know whether that was potentially me tweaking around with something, but I can see that it's slightly misaligned. But overall, it's a nice piece. You know, I really like these simple looking typography based pieces with a lot of the background. It's literally just Edison with that being replicated many times in different directions, which is quite cool, and it creates a nice like typography abstract pattern, which is great. A thing to point out is this little glow here. As you can see, it's been like masked off in like a square essentially. Same down here, so you'd ideally want to use a layer mask on this and kind of just feather this out with a soft brush just to create a nice realistic looking glow. But it's a really nice piece, you know, all the colors match, the colors of the kit match the colors of the background. You've got a nice bit of variety of the green in the background itself, with it being lighter towards the top and obviously having a nice shadow towards the bottom of it as well, which is great. Nice bits of text all around, with the lights being a nice addition, but obviously maybe just adding a bit of a layer mask just to kind of make it even better. And realistically, I don't think there's much to tweak on this, other than obviously pointing out the lights here that I've said, and maybe tweaking the pattern a little bit so it's not as visually busy potentially, and trying to kind of line up these actual text bits a little bit more so it's not as just kind of all over the place, as obviously your eyes kind of dotted about. So when you initially look at the piece, you kind of drawn up here, you've got Edison, and then you kind of just like, it's like a bit of a free-for-all kind of heading down the piece. So that could potentially be tweaked. But yeah, really solid piece, Bennie. Thank you for submitting, and let's go down to the speed art. So now that the second speed out section of the video is done, you've obviously seen on screen that it's not been as much of a drastic change as the previous design has, but it's been a few kind of fundamental subtle tweaks to the design that I think would help improve the piece. And obviously, as reference, as always, here is the before piece, and then here is the design afterwards. So the main change that I initially wasn't thinking of doing, but I ended up doing, is the changing of the pattern in the background. I've tried to kind of get something as close to the pattern on the shirt as I could. Obviously, it's not an exact replica of the pattern itself. That would be great, but with this being quite a quick overlook and kind of redesign of the piece, I've just kind of grabbed something that was quite similar-ish looking with the triangle shapes and things like that. I just think it looks a little bit more clean. I do like the typography, but I think it ended up looking a little bit messy when I was kind of looking over it in the kind of the redesign part of the video. So I've just stuck with something that's a little bit more similar to the kit itself and just a lot more simple, and it kind of helps the typography to pop out in the middle. So again, also the typography is something I've tweaked. I've kind of blown up a lot into the middle of the screen, and I've moved the other typographic elements kind of more towards the edges of the screen, just to kind of, again, just draw focus to the middle of the image and to Edison, it's like himself. And yeah, obviously before, after, as you can see, I've just used these elements in the corners and made sure everything's kind of spaced out evenly, and I've added these little lines to kind of help anchor down some of these elements and just kind of create a little bit of structure to the piece as well. The other thing that I did on the piece is that I've removed the lights, as I don't think they worked with what I was trying to do, but then I created kind of a really subtle glow towards the middle of the image, and I've kind of tweaked the treatment of Edison a little bit, just made him a little bit brighter so it kind of fit in with the light, and it just kind of brought out some of the details that you had in some of the more shadowed areas of the image. And then I also made sure that the pattern in the background is actually straight rather than being at an angle here. I do think the angle is quite cool sometimes as it kind of creates a more dynamic look to the image. But I think in this case it worked quite well with the text being obviously on a straight horizontal line, and then these elements of the design as well being on a straight line rather than at an angle. So it kind of made sense as it kind of helped to really structure the piece. But yeah, overall it wasn't a massive tweak. It's just little bits of stuff that you can change to kind of improve your designs, in my opinion anyway. Obviously, don't take this as like the be all and end all. This is just my opinion that I'm trying to give and help you guys to potentially improve and just show you things that you could potentially pick up on moving forward. But yeah, really nice design initially. I would really like the background, and obviously it's just a slightly different pattern essentially is what it is. And I just wanted to kind of really play out and emphasize the Edison typography in the middle of the piece, and then obviously moved everything kind of to second plan around the edge of the design. But again, thank you very much for sending your design through, Benny, much appreciated. And let's move on to design number 3. And now we've got the third design that has been submitted for this video, and it has been sent in by Bennie, but this time with a Y instead of an IE. And it's something a little bit different to what I usually cover, which is obviously primarily football designs, but this is a Steph Curry design from basketball. And it's just something different. Obviously, I can kind of review any sports related designs that you guys submit. I'm not necessarily going to have the same kind of knowledge about the sport as I do with football, but I'm going to try my best, so you guys can submit any designs that you want, and I'll try my best to kind of review them and give design feedback, obviously, rather than sport related feedback. But yeah, something a bit different. I really like the actual type that has been used in this piece, although I'm not 100% sure on the layout of the type itself, but it's a cool font and it's nicely kind of like distorted. It's very like hand drawn, it's very cool. And I like the idea behind the design. There's a couple of things that I would tweak in terms of the composition, but the idea of the clouds and having the certain parts of the city showing, the actual bridge itself, and having the plane in the top as well, having the sunlight, it's a cool design idea, but it can be definitely refined. It's something different, which is great. You know, we don't usually see things like this, so it's very nice and refreshing to see. But yeah, there's a couple of things that I'd tweak. Obviously, some of the cutouts would need a bit of a cleanup, obviously with a little bit of banding, as you can see around the edges of the cutout, and obviously in between the fingers that would need to be tweaked as well. And then I think you can see a very harsh kind of cutoff on the big cutout itself here, which I think would need tweaking. But yeah, it's something different, really cool typography. Although, yeah, like I said, the composition needs to be refined a little bit. But yeah, let's see what I can come up with in the speed out section. So now that you've seen how the speed art went and what I was kind of able to achieve within the speed art as well, I will show you obviously the before image just so you've got a point of reference, and then obviously the design after. So it's again a little bit of a different change, and it's quite a drastic change as well, similar to kind of the first design-ish, but it's not like a massive change overall when you think. Like when you look at the speed art, you can tell that it's not like a massive design tweak that I've done that took me like absolutely ages. It's just little things that can be tweaked and added to kind of bring the piece together and just kind of make sure everything's nicely, it just blends in nicely together really. And the main thing that I did obviously was tweak the composition, and I kind of blew this main cutout up a little bit more, and I've put the crown on top of the middle cutout's head as it kind of made sense. I've tweaked the positioning of the plane in the background as well, and then obviously had the smaller cutouts kind of hovering over his left and right shoulder, just to kind of have a nice trio of cutouts essentially in the middle of the design that really kind of helps to draw your eye in. And then I've moved the text towards the bottom of the image just to kind of replicate a bit of a film poster look really, as I did really like this font and I think it works really, really well, to be fair. I might actually try and use a bit of different typography myself in future designs rather than obviously just rinsing and repeating sans serif fonts. This is something a bit different and it's great to see. So yeah, fair play on trying something different. But yeah, again, another thing that I changed, the position of the logo of the NBA. Again, I've kind of moved it to the bottom of the poster itself just to kind of help replicate that kind of film poster theme and feel. I've added a little bit more clouds towards the bottom of the image itself just to kind of help bring the cutouts together and just kind of make it look as if he's kind of popping up out the clouds. Not necessarily saying he's like in heaven or something like that, but it kind of fits in with the original design, obviously with a lot of the clouds. I've ditched the image of the bridge, but what you could potentially do if, let's say, you've moved the text up slightly a little bit more towards here, you could have maybe like a bird's eye view of the bridge showing towards the bottom of this, kind of showing through the clouds, which I think would be quite cool. So that's definitely something you could try. And then another thing, obviously, that I did, I've moved the image of the city kind of behind the cutouts themselves. I've added a bit of distortion and a blur just to kind of make it seem as if it's just in the background really and not being the main point of focus. And then the last thing that I did was added a bit more of a glow and just added the glow onto the cutouts themselves as well, just kind of coming from the middle, just to kind of, yeah, just again blend everything together. You know, it's not a massive tweak, but it just really helps to kind of ground the piece together and just really tie things together, especially with 3 different cutouts being used, and it just helps it kind of feel like it's all part of the same composition and piece. And yeah, you know, it's nothing major. Fair play on the piece itself, as it's quite cool and it's something really different to what I'm used to seeing, to be honest, with a few different background elements used, you know, with the plane and stuff like that. I've not seen stuff like that on the series before, so definitely thank you very much for sending the piece, Benny. I hope no one's offended too much with the changes that I've done, and obviously all the social links will be down in the description below if you want to check out any of the guys that have been featured in the video. And obviously if you want to submit a piece yourself, get in touch with me through a DM or an email and I will make sure to check out the submissions. Thank you all guys so much for watching. If you enjoy the video, please do leave a like and a comment, and obviously subscribe if you want to see more of my videos in the future, and I will see you guys in the next episode.